Okay. So I just want to say, welcome again to the lead seat. And I'm Dr. Marilyn Clark, and I'm the president and CEO of Clark Consulting Group. And today, my guest is going to be Traci Delgado, who is a colleague and a friend of mine. Welcome, Traci.
Oh, thank you, Marilyn. It's so good to be here with you.
Yeah. And so today, Traci and I are going to talk about leadership in the context of hiring to retiring. And so, Traci, first tell me a little bit about yourself. What it is you do. I don't need to know the company per se, but tell me a little bit about what you do and what you love in this space.
Oh, thank you, Marilyn. I've been in the space in the talent development. I always call it talent enablement space for the past over 20 years. Won't say exactly how many, but
That's
for
okay.
very long time now.
Uh-huh.
And consider myself a leader in the space. I love the space, talent enablement. And when I think about talent enablement, it encompasses like three main buckets: talent development, talent management, and employee experience, all the way from hire to retire.
Hmm. I like that. I like that. Hire
Love,
to
love
retire.
the space. Love seeing people grow and flourish, and love
Hmm.
great, unique cultures.
Okay, great. Well, today we're just going to be free flowing. We're just going to go with some questions. I know there was some things that you wanted to highlight that you wanted to talk about today, and I had some questions as well. So we'll
Sure.
just, have this conversation, and make it just, just some girl talk, us just talking today. So
Sounds like fun.
you mentioned hire to retire. So let's start with the hire. Let's go there and go through. So traits to look for in a potential leader during the hiring process. Tell me a little bit about your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think a couple of traits you want to look for is number one, are they a great fit for the culture? Because we've heard, the adage, hey, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So when you're hiring a leader, you want them to be driving the strategy. But the most important thing is, are they a great culture fit? Will they be a future leader of the organization? Will they inspire others to be ambassadors of the culture? And will they be one too? So are they a great culture fit? Because we know when you bring them to the table, of course, they can do the job, they can do the function.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first thing. And the other thing, are they the type of leader that you want in your company? Meaning that if you have a company folk profile, like for instance, due north in terms of what does great leadership look like at my company, XYZ company, assess them against that profile and ensure that they're fitting within your expectations of leadership within the organization. So mainly those two things. And then the other thing is, do they have a bit of EQ, emotional, intelligence to lead in today's world?
Mm-hmm.
So those three things.
Those three things. Um, I know that you're a leader and that you do recruit, that you hire, you have a team underneath you. So when we talk about and you know your culture where you work. So tell me a little bit about your thoughts about how the culture at the company you work at when you are assessing a potential hire. What are some of the exact kind of traits that you're looking for?
Yeah, so we have a very strong culture here at my company, and it's very unique. I've never seen a culture like it, and I came here because it's so unique. It's a
Hmm.
very, I would dare say, loving culture. It's a
Oh.
culture that you don't find in today's world where people care about each other, they love each other. It's a multi-billion-dollar corporation,
Mhm.
but it has somewhat of a like a foundation of like a Christian foundation or a foundation of faith. So
Okay.
the founding father was a man of faith, and we welcome all faiths to the organization. But that foundation is a foundation of love, which makes the organization unique. So what we're doing right now, and what I'm supporting, is us shifting from being nice. So we're very nice culture too. So we're not
Okay.
great at giving hard feedback, candid feedback.
Uh-huh.
I want to support the organization in moving from being nice to being kind.
Okay.
and that's very different. So I'm looking for leaders who are not perfect. I'm not going to let perfect get in the way of getting better, but
Mhm.
leaders that have, a level of EQ that can fit in with the culture, um, and that exhibit a level of kindness.
Okay.
And
Okay.
so, and when I look about that, could this person display empathy in our culture? Could they be someone that stewards trust? Do they take ownership? And do they have an eye for equality?
Hmm. Okay. Um, how I have a question and I love it. I love that culture. And you're right, you don't find that too much in today's society, even, in the business world and even in our society today. Okay, as far as the country is concerned, we're not finding a lot of
No,
kindness.
I
So,
have to say, what
right.
the world needs now is love, sweet
So,
love.
right. Right. If we could get back there, that would
Yeah.
be so wonderful. Maybe your company can be the model, for where we like to go in the future when it comes to that. But when we're doing and looking at these potential leaders during the hiring process, how do you go about avoiding bias when you're assessing their leadership potential during the hiring process?
That's a good question. And we are going through processes to eliminate bias, and we're very, very serious about it, but not perfect yet.
Mm-hmm.
And so, one thing that my company does, and I think other companies do also, is that first screening. It's done by phone, purely phone. Now, you might say, all I have to do is look you up on LinkedIn. That's true,
True. Yeah.
and we see who you are. But there is an effort in HR to have a phone call, and we ask, don't look up the person, just look at the resume, and just have the first screening. The other thing that we do is an unconscious bias session with all of our HR folks and people who are in people leaders who hire others.
Mm-hmm.
And so, in terms of eliminating the bias, it's not completely eliminated. I don't even know if you can do that with AI
Right.
quite perfectly yet. But one thing we do is that when we look across our leadership team, we ask ourselves, is it the level of diversity that we want? And that we know we could get out into the market. And it hasn't been. And so we ensure that we go out and get it. And we know and we believe, and our CEO tells us,
Mm-hmm.
this company can attract the best talent on the planet. And that talent comes in all colors. And
Mm-hmm.
of color and the people of diverse backgrounds that we have on our bench, they're the best in the world.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Next, what qualities should recruiters prioritize to ensure long-term leadership development?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. The first thing that comes to mind for me is a quality where a person has curiosity
Mm-hmm.
and they
Okay.
have a love of learning and growing. And they have a growth mindset, if you will, and just open, to change, open to being vulnerable, if you will, and open to learning. And they don't have to be perfect, but just, have an open mind.
Okay. Okay. What are some other things, Tracy? I know you said there was some things you had saw in regards to this that you wanted to speak on. So tell me another thing that you wanted to speak on that you had on your list.
Yeah, one thing you had on the list, Marilyn, is an onboarding process for leaders. And that's near and dear to my heart because it's important. And I remember reading an article, I don't know if it was Harvard Business Review or others, that said something to the point of over 40% of all leaders fail or underperform within the first 18 months of hiring.
Really?
And yes, and the way that they're onboarded into the organization has an impact on that.
Oh.
So when you think about it, when you bring a leader to the table, no matter if they're a CEO or if they're just a, manager level or supervisor, when you bring them in, they have the technical capabilities to do the job. But one of the number one reasons why they fail is because when they're onboarded into the organization, they have not created the relationships and the networking um, communities within the organization, and they don't understand the organization well enough to thrive in it. So with onboarding, I think it's number one, it's very important that of course you're going to have the great
Mhm.
match, but ensure that even before the interviewing process starts, that the way you display your culture, your value proposition, employee proposition online, that
Mhm.
the work that you're doing to attract people reflects that.
Mhm.
So if you're a kind organization, ensure that that is displayed outwardly. And when you're going through the interviewing process, and another example is that, let's say you're number one, you're number two, right? And you don't get picked to come on board. Is the organization that calls itself kind going back to the person that didn't make it to the last round and calling them up and saying why,
Mhm.
versus giving them some type of automated,
Right. Dear John letter.
response?
Yeah,
Exactly.
I call it the Dear John letter.
Yes. And it's so,
Yeah.
the person spent all this time,
Right. Yes.
all panel interviews and all of that, and then you get a Dear John letter. That,
Yeah.
that's not very kind.
No, it's not.
So
Yeah.
whatever your culture is, right? Display that,
Mm-hmm.
from the beginning. And once they get inside, the day they start, right? Continue to display it, continue to welcome them into the company. So, one thing we've done, and I've incorporated in our company when I first got here, is that if you're, VP Director Plus,
Mhm.
once you accept the offer, a gift basket is sent to your home immediately overnight.
Nice.
Yeah. And I
Mhm.
got that because when I interviewed, my final interview for a role that I was taking on, gosh, this had to be over 10 years ago.
Uh-huh.
We had a lunch. My offered lunch. It was just a lunch. I had not accepted the offer. By the time I got home from the lunch, I don't know how they did this. There was a gift basket on my porch.
Oh, nice. I
And it
love that.
said, give it a weekend to think about it, give it a few days. We would love to have you a part of this work family.
I love that. I love
So
that
before
idea.
I could say, yes, I accept, my husband said, that's where I love for you to go work. They care. So
Right.
just, little things that cost the company little that you can do to
Hmm.
welcome them. Whatever way your culture, um, whatever your culture is,
Hmm.
be reflective in the way you welcome them. So that's the first thing. And then the other thing is the next 90 days, have a strategy in place. What do they need to be thinking about? Maybe the first thing is that all you need to do is learn. Or maybe you do need them to build out a strategy, but set the expectations. And then the last thing is the most important thing is that give them a mentor, establish a community for them, to thrive in, and stakeholders that will support them in
Hmm.
their first 90 days.
Hmm. So with your company or with your thoughts as a leader, is do you lean more towards a formal type of onboarding where it's all laid out that a new leader coming in is going to go through these different stages, or is it kind of we have um, I will say a framework, and then depending on the leader and the level and the job that they're going to be in, you tweak it to match to get them, successfully onboarded. Can you tell me a little bit about how you do that?
Yeah, so it's a hybrid. And
Okay.
again, what works for your company, I think is important. It just depends. I came
Hmm.
from a company years ago where it was very prescriptive and it was prescriptive for a reason. And onboarding was not just onboarding, it was an immersion into a company. So, but this is a company that has 80,000 employees. So
Hmm.
that's important. But I think a hybrid would be fine where, like, for instance, the first 2 weeks, um, it's more prescriptive. These are the people that you're meeting with. This is your tribe. These are your key contacts and stakeholders. And then there's the plug and play of like tours to other facilities and things that they and the leader and their manager can decide to do or not to do, and they can customize it. But I think the important thing is that HR in my company, I lead the onboarding process. So what I
Hmm.
have is a menu of options past the first 2 weeks that they can do that we can set
Oh,
them up for. Yeah, and I think
okay.
that's important. So you can customize it to fit. But I think the most important thing is to have the same framework ready for a
Right.
leader and their manager to plug and play.
Okay. I like that. Yeah, I like that cafeteria style kind of
Yeah.
feel about that. Um, is there anything else you want to tell me about onboarding? or setting the foundations?
Yeah. I think onboarding is an opportunity. Again, the first piece is to welcome. So you only get, so many chances to make a first impression. And what
Mhm.
leaders do, and most people do, is that within the first, if you're a high level leader, within the first 2 months of being onboarding, you've made your decision of whether or not you want to stay.
Oh, so is this an option or it's kind of unwritten rule, or how does that work?
Oh, according to research. So what
Oh,
I'm saying is, according to research, most leaders, most
mhm.
executives, pretty much make their decision within the first few months whether
Okay,
or not they feel that they belong and that they can stay in this organization.
I
It
see.
doesn't mean that they leave.
Okay,
But what it
okay.
means is, again, the first impression, what I get out of the organization within the first few months,
Hmm.
right, is reflective of what it might be for
Hmm.
years to come. So what I'm saying is making sure that onboarding is more than just onboarding, but it's immersion into the culture. Because when it's not, that's when the
Gotcha,
pitfalls happen.
gotcha.
Yeah. And
Okay.
again, onboarding at all levels. So if I'm treating executives well, if I'm sending them gift baskets and things like that, think about the people who are on the ground, the workers who are deeper in the organization, the hourly workers, right? Same thing. You may not send them a gift basket, but you can send them a t-shirt. You
Yeah,
can put it in a bag. You
or
can wrap
what?
it up and
Right.
do something very, very nice
Yeah, a water
for them.
bottle, you know what I'm saying? Yeah,
Yes, yes. But
something.
with all of it, make sure that person understands the expectations, whatever's expected of them, and make sure it's clear.
Mhm. Okay. I wanted to ask you some questions around early career development. And I wanted to kind of share a little story that I remember in my career years back, uh, where I was working. This was back when we used to have community banks before the Big Five emerged. And when we fostered leadership in junior roles, I worked with in the department where I was working in human resources, I'll say that, but we had a program for hires out of college. We had this commercial lending program
Mhm.
where they would come in, go through as junior employees, they would go through an 18-month rotation and learn all the different facets of the bank, like credit department. They would work in the credit department. They would work in mortgage. They would work and maybe go through a cycle in bookkeeping. All the different areas, and then commercial lending. When they came out, then they would be a commercial lender. Okay, and
God.
it was kind of new age at the time, so that's how many years ago it was. It was a long time ago, but when we're identifying leadership traits, I want to talk a little bit about identifying leadership traits in junior employees.
Hmm.
So, okay, what can you tell me your thoughts are when it comes to identifying the traits or providing, mentorship for early leadership opportunities?
Yeah. So I think for early um career people,
Mhm.
you have to give more grace, right?
Okay,
So
okay.
EQ may not be 100% there, but they want to thrive. They want to grow. I think most of all, they want to learn. Um,
Hmm.
and they don't come in thinking that they're a know-it-all or a want-it-all, but just willing to put in the time, willing to put in the effort, and willing to grow. I think that's the most important thing.
Okay, okay. Well, tell me, Tracy, what else would you like to share with me about the hire to retire? Because I kind of was wanting to walk through, okay, we've got the leader in the door, we've got them, onboarded. They're in that onboarding process, which doesn't happen, you're right, overnight. It does take some months to get them, immersed into not only the culture, but the job and the community per se. So what would be next after that?
Yeah, I think next after that, once they're in the door, and let's say once they're in the door, 90 days,
Mm-hmm.
immerse them in, what leadership looks like at the company. So the company I work for, we have a leader model, which I love.
Okay.
Companies have leader model, and that is the expectations for leadership. So our leader model has 6 habits that we want all leaders to display. And so after your first 90 days, you get to go deeper into those habits. And we teach you those habits and what it looks like. So for one habit is be relational, right? That relates right to EQ and having what we call rare leadership habits. And that's being a mature leader,
Mhm.
right? That can, bring people along, create a vision, inspire people to get there. And so you want to go deeper into whatever you say are your leadership habits, and what makes for good for leadership at your organization. Go deeper, train them on it, and make sure that you set them up to model it. Because when they're modeling what you say is good, that helps them elevate to the next level. And so along that leadership employee experience, say, I'll say,
Mhm.
give them opportunities to take it to the next level. Give them training. And not only training, you think about the 70-20, the 70-20-10,
Mhm.
right? 10% is the formal training, and the 70% is the experience.
Mhm.
Give them the experience that they need to take it to the next level. It might be a global stint somewhere, an assignment. It might be exported to another area of the business to get another set of experiences. But make sure that you have that path laid out for each function, and each level of leadership. And
Mhm.
just meet them where they are at each pivotal moment. So when they come in, let's say as an individual contributor, early career, right? And they're moving into a supervisor role or a manager role, right? That's a big step. You're going to being your peer's buddy to your peer's boss.
Right.
Prepare for that.
Mhm.
And then when you go from, let's say, a manager level to a director level, that's a leap. But when you go from a director level to a VP level, that's even a steeper climb. And that's where it's important to give, you know, individualized, coaching, and a development process long term for that person. So each, I guess, leadership level provide the coaching, provide the development, that's needed. Not only classroom training, but also the experience.
Right.
And
Um,
then, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Go
I'll
ahead
just
now. We're
say,
just talking.
and then when you're, you get to the level or to the period in your career where you're ready to retire, or sometimes, Marilyn, and this happens to almost everybody, the company has a downsizing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So whichever way you treated those people when you got them in, you should treat them the same way when they go out. They should be treated with dignity and respect.
I,
So even if it was a layoff, or even if it was a let go, for performance or whatever,
Mhm.
companies should try their best to make sure that that person feels a sense of value when they go out the door, because they will talk.
Right.
So it's not only just for the poor employee, but for
Right.
your organization as well. They talk.
Right, that's true.
Yeah.
Your public image is very important. And I truly believe over the years, I've done a lot of, having an corporate HR background for career for a lot of times that the employees are my customers. And so you're absolutely right. Respect and dignity coming in the door, going out the door. There's a right way and a wrong way to do everything.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it doesn't take a lot of
It
money. It
doesn't
doesn't
take,
take
no,
effort. It
no.
just takes a level of care.
Yeah, that's all it is. That's all it is. I
Yeah.
want to step back to mid-career because here's a question, and sometimes that comes up when you're right, someone is transitioning from an individual, from what do they say, buddy to boss. Okay. Give me your thoughts about handling the imposter syndrome, the many faces that can come into play when you're promoted into leadership. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts on that one?
Yeah. Is it just mid-career? Doesn't it happen at every
I
level?
guess you're right. It could happen at any time.
I'm sure if you're the president of a country of the United States, there's a level of that within
Yeah,
all of us, right?
right.
But I think it goes back to, you know, um, if whoever their manager is, or even the culture of the organization in
Mhm.
HR, create a spirit of empathy, right?
Mhm.
In the
Okay.
entire organization and humility. That way people feel safe to say, I don't know, because all of us don't know.
That's true.
I was in a
That's true.
financial statement meeting in my company last week, and there were some terms used. I had no idea what they were. And I was embarrassed. And so I went and asked my colleague, I'm like, what you were talking about XYZ. What does that mean? He said, I have no
Mhm.
idea. I'm like,
I didn't know either.
you're giving the presentation. Well, I'm so glad because I don't know either. And so, we got to have a discussion about let's make it okay to
Mhm.
not know.
Right.
And I think it's best to, we feel this imposter syndrome because we don't feel safe.
Okay. All right.
You know, you
Mhm.
don't feel good enough, right? Because you're
Right.
comparing yourself to what other people
To
might know.
others. True.
They may not know either, you
Right.
know.
Right.
So I think especially when you're early career or mid career, actually at any level,
Mm-hmm.
if you create a space where people can say they don't know, I think that will eliminate the imposter syndrome, or at least create a space where people can open up
Right, and
and
open
be
up.
okay.
So creating a space, I think, where people have that psychological safety and
Yes.
feel safe that I can be vulnerable. Because a lot of times, and I can even say, there are times in my career, in past years where you're right, imposter syndrome raises its ugly head, and it's like you don't want people to think you don't know, what I'm saying, what something. So I always kind of struggle, not struggle with it personally, but struggle in helping at every level, like you said, leaders cope with that.
Yeah.
That's something that I always look to, especially in my practice, is helping them cope with that. How do I cope with that? Because some people will say, I don't get it. I don't have imposter syndrome. And I'm like, we're all human here.
Yeah.
Okay, so even if it was a blink of the eye kind of feeling that you had, I'm sure at some point, at some time, somewhere, it just, could have been a blink of an eye, but you felt it. So having that support and having the feeling of being able to feel that I can be vulnerable, because I'm like you, I'm big on learning, and growing, and that's what I do, when it comes to employees and organizations. So I'm big on that. So tell me some more, Traci. Let's talk a little bit more. I want you to I don't want to ask all the questions. Tell me some things you'd like just to tell me about that you're passionate about.
Yeah. So
Mhm.
I have become even more passionate, Marilyn, about work-life balance. So we've
Okay.
come back from the pandemic, and there's all kinds of feelings about, should we come back into the office 5 days a week, or should we not, or whatever. And people are struggling. We know there's a mental health
Mhm.
issue in this country
Mhm.
and in this world. So I think companies, especially those in HR, really need to have the pulse on the organization and how people are feeling you know. And the company I'm with right now, we do a vibe survey. We used to do it every week. Every week we would test,
Mhm.
how are people feeling? And the question would be, how are you feeling? Not if you're getting your work done. How are you
Mhm.
feeling?
Mhm.
And I think that's important. And I think we need to tap into the care of our employees, because obviously that spills out into the environment, that spills out into families. When people go to work, what I share with my team is I want you to be a type of leader where when your employees go home, what are they saying about you to their spouses, to their children?
Children.
You know
Mhm.
what I mean? Because
Mhm.
it spills over. So we need to
Yes.
have a level of care for each other, and the organization needs to care, because I'm saying we're in a crisis,
Mhm. Mhm.
if you think about it in this
Yep.
country and in the world.
Right.
And so we talk about, human resources, talent development, right? How do we reach everyone as much as we can where they are and create cultures where people can thrive and grow but not be stressed out. Because sometimes at work, you can be having fun, meeting the mark and, driving change and doing all these great things, right? But you're spent and you're tired and you're on the brink of being burnt out.
Yeah.
I believe that should never be. And so, how do you notice that within the organization? How do you keep the pulse and know we're driving too hard, even though everybody's excited, right? You may be driving a little bit too hard or a bit too fast.
Mhm. So
So
what are
how do you do both? How do you do both?
how to do
How do you
both?
meet the
Right.
objectives and at the same time create an environment where people are healthy
Okay. So
mentally and physically?
yeah, tell me some of the tactics and strategies that a corporation or leadership can use to make that happen. What is some of your thoughts around that?
I think, like I mentioned before, some just keeping the pulse, noticing, and training up your leaders, each of the leaders to notice. We train them up to notice great talent when we see them. Do we train them up to notice if someone is having a crisis?
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Gotcha.
when you notice absenteeism, when you notice, repetitive, um, calls off sick or whatever it is, or just
Something.
even people just showing up and they're looking different and you can tell.
Right.
I
Right.
think that's one
Yeah.
thing.
Right. I know that empathy comes in there and that understanding because I'm sure you and I both can think of a number of cases with employees where, everything's going along fine and then something just happens. And I think what leaders need to do is pay attention. It's not just all about the work. It's pay
Yeah,
attention to, like you say, how are you feeling? How are you doing? How are your employees doing? Because if there's a shift in something with a person, something's going on. And
absolutely.
that's the difference between being a manager and being a leader, because a manager gets the work done, but a leader is the one that's going to care about how the work gets done
Absolutely. And a leader can happen at every level. They can
at
be on the
every level.
line,
Right.
assembly line, anywhere, individual contributor. But you're right, Marilyn, the leader notices. And so for the organization, what they can do and what we've done at the organization I'm with is that um, we're asking all of our managers to have one-on-ones with their people.
Okay.
And so we create an environment where people have time to have one-on-ones, and we make it for every leader that comes through the door. Your new leader coming through the door, the expectation is that you have one-on-ones periodically. Usually, it's once a week with your folks, because how else would you ever know? And
Right.
this is the caveat though. When you have the one-on-one, it's not about getting the work done. It's not about driving the results. The first question needs to be, how are you?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So you're doing a barometer check. And it wasn't even easy for me because I'm
Mm-hmm.
like a D personality. Hey, let's drive it, let's get it done. And
Right.
so for everybody, the first thing that should come to the leader's mind, asking, the employee, how are you? What's going on with you? And even when they start with the work, how do you shift the conversation back to them?
Join us next week as we continue our conversation with Traci Delgado.